Hey, it's Dave Salvadore of Blueline Design. Thanks for coming back to my channel where today I begin the build for the 3D Blood Bowl board. So let's get right into that. I'm going to start off the build with a good foundation by focusing on the board and the corner pieces that will support it. I'm going to make a two-sided board. One side will have a grass playing field, the other side will be dungeon tiles. With my HeroQuest build, I was scaling up the entire board to give more space for rooms and hallways. Because Blood Bowl is just a field and I don't have to think of any of that stuff, I can make it the exact scale as the original game board. I'm going to have a 1.5 inch frame around the entire field so that the corner pieces will have something to grab onto. I want the board to be really sturdy, so I'm going to use 2 pieces of XPS foam, one for each side of the fields. I'm going to mount both pieces of the XPS foam to a 1/2 inch piece of black foam board using spray glue. This will make sure that the board is really sturdy and beefy and not have any warping. After gluing together the boards, I press it down with heavy books and weights to make sure they're nice and stuck together. With the boards securely glued together, I now have a nice foundation to work on my two-sided Blood Bowl field. Next, I want to build the foundations for the pillars. I'm going to stack several pieces of XPS foam like a layered cake so that it will raise up the board off of the table. I then created foam templates that I would use to quickly replicate the pattern of each layer to the different pieces of foam. In this quick mock-up that I did, you'll see the idea is to stack the layers so that the board will key into the pillars. I started off by cutting out all the basic squares that were going to be used to make the pillars. Once I had all the squares, I used my templates to draw in the shapes of each layer. Once I had all the shapes cut out, I just followed my pattern and hot glued my foam layer cake together. And as you can see, the board will key nicely into each pillar. Once the foundations for all the pillars were blocked out, I can now begin to shape them into the Aztec temple ruins. One thing that will really sell the look of the Aztec ruins is the sloped sides of the structure. So in order to do that, I grab my branch saw and just carve right through all 7 layers of that foam. A happy accident is that the saw left a texture in the foam that kind of looked like old stone. With the foundation now completed, I'm going to share how I made the pillars go from a block of foam to looking like Aztec ruins. The ledge that is carved out in the Aztec ruins will really sell this look. I used my project knife to score one of the ledges, then my X-Acto blade to cut out a small grid, and then a sculpting tool to pick out the squares of the grid. I then use a rasp to scratch in something similar to the saw texture on the areas that were still smooth. And then I use a piece of drywall sandpaper to quickly knock off some of the debris. I use a thin piece of wood with some of the drywall sandpaper to get into the ledge. And then using my trusty ball of tin foil, I hammer in some more texture into the temple ruin. Now I'm going to share a cool technique that I learned to make textured stones.
How to make Aztec textured stones.
Take a Tupperware bin and put in some rocks that you found outside. I found that ones that have kind of sharp edges worked really well. Cut up some random XPS foam block shapes, put them in the Tupperware bin, put the lid on, and give them a good shake, rattle, and roll, baby. After about 5 minutes of shaking them up, all of the foam blocks have been kind of rounded out and beat up, and a neat texture is all over them, and now they look like Aztec textured stones that we can use in the rest of the build. I take some of the Aztec textured stones and I key them into places that I've cut out randomly on the structure. Then I use hot glue to hold them into place. Another technique I use is just to carve out a stone so that it looks like it has sunk back a little bit, and then I use the foil ball to add some texture. I grab a ballpoint pen to carve in some of the brick patterns into the temple ruins. I reference several photos for inspiration and notice all kinds of neat details about how the blocks would lock together. Finally, I would carve out random chunks here and there to give it that old, dilapidated ruin look. With the pillars completed, I could then move on to doing a base coat of Mod Podge and paint. I want the ruins to have a creamy white color to them, so I started off with Mod Podge, a tan color, and a little bit of the gray that was left over from my dungeon build. I put 2 liberal coatings of the Mod Podge craft paint mix on it. The reason why is some of the saw texture was a little heavy, so I used the base coats to smooth it out a little bit. And after the first coat, I even took some of the drywall sandpaper to knock down a little bit of that texture as well. So I was really happy with how these pillars turned out. I've established the look of the Aztec ruins. These are now base coated and ready to paint. I'm really excited for the rest of this build. In the next video, I'm going to continue with the build by working on the field. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and if you want to know about the next video, hit the bell icon. Until next time, keep drawing, keep designing.